Guys, I'm just grabbing a glass of water. Be right back.
There, we are live.
Be right back.
Good morning, everyone. We'll just, okay, Mayor Crombie just stepped out, but I guess we can start and she will join. Everyone can hear me clearly? Just, okay, good. Good morning and welcome to our virtual board meeting. As we continue to hold virtual meetings, there are a few housekeeping items to keep in mind. We are streaming the public portion of this meeting live on our YouTube channel. If we happen to experience any technical difficulties with the live stream, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube. To those who are in attendance, your microphone has been muted, and I ask that you put your hand up if you would like to speak, and we will retain a list of speaking requests as we go. Once you are called upon to speak, please unmute yourself and proceed. We ask that you please always keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking. As it relates to voting, please raise a hand to indicate your vote when a vote is called. Should you be disconnected from a video call, please rejoin using the link previously provided. Public board agenda. We will now begin with the Peel Police Services Board meeting of August 21, 2020. Roll call. All members present. Yes, I can see. Are there any declaration of conflict of interest? Seeing none. We will continue with the meeting. The first item will be the approval of the minutes of the meeting held on Friday, June 26, 2020. Can I have a mover? Mayor Crombie, seconded by Mr. Barton. All in favor? Anyone opposed? None? Approved. Next, we have the board members' questions or announcements. Do any member have any question or announcement? If so, please put your hand up. So no, Mayor Crombie, something? No? Okay, that's good. Yes, so the next we have is deputations. We have one deputation included in our agenda from the Stop Police Profiling group. It's already in our binder. I call to move to receive the deputation. May I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Mr. Atia, seconded by Mayor Brown. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Approved. Now we move on to the presentation. Diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. Our first presentation today is from Ms. Saleha Khan, Manager of Diversity and Inclusion for Peel Regional Police, and Mr. Michael Bach, CEO of Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, who will present the board with the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. We will wait until the end of the presentation and then open for questions. Reminder to please put your hand up. Welcome, and please go ahead and share your screen with the presentation.
And Chair Chadha, if I may just open a couple of comments for the board. It's good to see everybody and virtually in the middle of summer. Normally, as you know, this board meeting would be a procedural one for budgetary reasons, but I hope that at the end of this, we all can take stock in the fact that we're moving with a lot of key activities happening, coming to fruition. And this one in particular, I think the board would agree quite publicly. The world knows that there was a CCDI survey several years ago, the board commission, which had identified opportunities, gaps. And here's a big milestone. Today we begin by presenting to you, the board, our roadmap and strategy forward, which is one which us as all deputies in this organization are going to embrace and are already embarked on for some authentic change. So happy to have Michael Bach from CCDI, which many of you know, and Ms. Salia Khan, who has been a great, let's say, a shepherd for this initiative. So a big day, and we're going to close the book on people pointing out, the gaps of the past and begin the journey forward to really make some meaningful change. So I'll turn it over to Salia and Michael.
Good morning, everyone. This is Salia. I'm recognizing that we have very limited time. I'm just going to very quickly introduce Michael Bach. Michael is internationally recognized as a thought leader and subject matter expert in the field of diversity, inclusion, and employment equity. He has deep experience in strategy development, stakeholder engagement, training and development, research, solution development, and execution, employee engagement, data analytics, measurement, and diversity scorecards. He's worked with targeting recruiting strategies, marketing and communications, of course, employee resource groups, which we are internally calling internal support networks, diversity councils, and diversity-related legislation, for example, Employment Equity Act and AODA, et cetera, among other skills and experiences. And his most recent feather in the cap is his new book called Birds of All Feathers, Doing Diversity and Inclusion Right. And it's currently available online and at bookstores nationwide. So I'm just going to turn it over now to Michael. And I know he's already sharing the screen.
Yes, thank you, Salia, for that introduction. And thank you, Chief and Board, for having me. I am going to give you a bit of an update on where we have gotten to regarding the development of a diversity and inclusion strategy for Peel Regional Police. I thought I would start with just a bit of a reminder of some of the completed work done to date. Our work began with the delivery of a current state inclusivity assessment for Peel Regional Police starting in May of 2017. And over the course of 2017 and 2018, we collected data in multiple ways, including interviews and assessments with leaders of Peel Regional Police, as well as the Services Board at the time. We reviewed policies, we conducted public town hall consultations and a public survey. We conducted a census and inclusion survey and ran focus groups with various demographic groups and benchmarked Peel Regional Police by conducting a media scan and literature review. All of these items formed the current state inclusivity assessment, which was presented to and unanimously accepted by the Peel Police Services Board in March of 2019.
Michael?
Yes, please.
Deputy Chief O'Doherty. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we could see your notes screen and it covers up the, so you might have a split screen going. Yeah.
They do. Is that better?
Yeah, that's great.
Excellent. Sorry about that.
No.
Apologize. So Peel Regional Police worked with CCDI to establish a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee in September of 2019. We had 114 applications that were reviewed, and 18 members were selected to join the committee. To ensure a fair and equitable team, a cross-section of employees, including both sworn and civilian members, were accepted from different divisions, departments, seniority levels, and demographic groups. The committee completed 4 hours of training conducted by CCDI before getting into the development of a strategy, again, with the assistance of my organization. I'm not going to read out all the names, but these are the key players who were instrumental in the development of the strategy, including members of the committee, the project leads, and of course, Salia Khan, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager for Peel Police. So the project leads, Mark, Robert, and Angelia, assembled the DEI committee, worked with CCDI to hire the DEI manager, and oversaw the strategy development. Our facilitator, Angelina Sisipule, who sends her regrets that she is not available to be here today, she worked with the committee as well as the manager and project leads to facilitate the strategy sessions and present the final strategy to the committee and the Chiefs Management Group. The committee actively participated in the strategy development sessions by providing input, and Salia provided expertise in the final strategy sessions. All of the individuals listed on the previous slides dedicated multiple hours of their time to participate in the strategy development process between November of 2019, when we began with the visioning session, and June of 2020, when we presented the final strategy to the committee. So we want to thank them for their commitment and their time on this work. I now want to give you an overview of the 4-year action plan that has been put forward. The visioning statement and coming from the CSIA, it was very apparent from the very beginning that the Peel Regional Police needed to do a better job of fostering trust amongst both sworn and civilian members. And so as a consequence, the visioning statement begins with trust. It's also important that this strategy holds everyone from leaders to members accountable for promoting diversity and inclusion within PRP. The strategy focuses on action items that all members and leaders will be accountable for, and it's focusing on doing this both internally inside Peel Regional Police as well as externally in the community which you serve. Oops, I am going too fast here. There were 3 strategic goals that were established to support the strategy. First was organizational commitment, and this is the largest section of the strategy. It outlines actions for fostering trust and transparency with the community, service-wide accountability, and resources for advancing the DEI goals. Second is leadership commitment, and leaders will be held accountable for increasing their own cultural competency, identifying and removing barriers, and fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion within the organization and the community. And last is employee commitment. Employees, including, again, both sworn and civilian members, will need to recognize their own contribution to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts through training and application of the strategy, because an effective and sustainable strategy requires all hands on deck. Starting with organizational commitment, a number of these initiatives are already in place at PRP and will simply need to continue or be expanded. Efforts to foster trust and transparency within the community include town hall consultations, social media engagement to reach across the community, surveys to collect data, updating criteria for career development to include diversity relations, a closer focus on underrepresented demographics, and applying a DEI lens to ongoing communications. Efforts to promote service-wide accountability include developing a DEI curriculum that covers a wide variety of topics such as bias, cultural competence, anti-racism, and mental health. Certifying the corporate development team in the Intercultural Development Inventory, or IDI. Continuing to expand recruitment efforts to attract underrepresented communities, and integrating D&I training as part of career development processes. In order for this strategy to work, sufficient infrastructure and resources will need to be provided to advance DEI goals. In particular, Peel Regional Police will require the following: people, time, budget, and administrative support to implement the strategy. Enhancing educational opportunities for minority members of the service. Improving diversity data by including demographic questions on all surveys. And gathering feedback from diverse employees and reporting on issues and next steps to employees. Additional resources that we believe are needed to advance DEI include reviewing all training to remove messaging that is contradictory to diversity, equity, and inclusion, incorporating DEI content into all PRP training, implementing mental health training for all members at regular intervals, offering career development programs, reviewing and enhancing recruitment processes to remove barriers and unintended inequities, and ensuring accessibility is provided in all documentation and communication for recruitment. Moving on to the leadership commitments, a key accountability for leadership is to increase cultural competence to help leaders support diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives within Peel Regional Police. Leaders have been tasked with a number of accountabilities to support this strategy. They include reviewing job postings through a DEI lens, understanding the impact their biases have on selection, development, and advancement decisions, reducing barriers for inclusion of women and trans folks in the service and in leadership, and increase support to accommodate persons with disabilities. Leaders will also be held accountable to the organization internally and the community externally for fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion. Items include engaging with communities via social media, formal events, and grassroots events, continuing multi-year recruitment outreach and retention plans, ensuring all employees have equitable access to DEI learning and engagement opportunities, and communicating DEI messages at team meetings. Finally, this third strategic priority is about employee commitment, and it requires all employees to bring this strategy to life. Employees will be accountable for modeling allyship against remarks, jokes, and behavior that are sexist, racist, anti-immigrant, homophobic, transphobic, etc. Participating in DEI learning and communications efforts, and increasing trust and developing a safe environment in their day-to-day interactions in the service so that members feel safe to make a complaint against inappropriate behavior. Just quickly, as I wrap up, and then I'm happy to take questions around supporting the strategic goals. The efforts been outlined in the previous slides have been organized by internal and external efforts to demonstrate the amount of organizational and community-wide involvement that will be required to implement and execute on this strategy. Accountabilities have been assigned to a number of different groups because it takes more than an HR team, a DEI committee, or a DEI manager to implement what has been put forward as a very complex and multi-year strategy. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you for the presentation. Is there any question or comments from the board? Any question? Mayor Crombie?
Thanks. Oh, I wasn't muted, or maybe you unmuted me. Hi, thank you for the presentation. It's very thorough. It's also very high level, I would say. So I want to know the steps, the actual tactics that will be employed to help the Peel Police foster greater trust in the community, and as well what specifically will be done with respect to more training, enhanced training to remove anti-racism with specific emphasis on anti-Black racism.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Crombie. Yes, this is very high level, and the strategy and initiatives that we've worked with the committee to put forward are not. In fact, they're quite tactical. Salia, I don't know if you would rather speak to any of the specifics that you're going to be working on.
Absolutely. So, good morning. With respect to, I know it's kind of a question. So, when you're about the pieces specifically around racism, dealing with systemic discrimination, as well as focus on the Black racism. So all that.
Really you're really breaking up a lot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think it's better, but better now if you can try. I was about to say that the same.
Is it, can you hear me now?
Yes, it's better. Please continue.
Sorry. I was just saying that we do have some systems and processes in place. The DEI Council, or the active committee, the membership, is definitely part of the focus group that is going to help us pull together the specific pieces that we need. That is with respect to the training development. Some of the steps, of course, taken is we've gone and looked into what other services are doing, what other options are available, what other sectors are also doing. So this is, of course, under development as we speak. My focus is going beyond training, because I know we tend to go for training, but what's really important is creating that environment that is going to support the actual implementation of training when that happens. So for that purpose, we have internal support networks that have just been established and are being pulled together and launched. So this is when we look at the employee relationships, trust building, as well as really building their capacities across the board, just so that people feel more comfortable being courageous and stepping up when it is required for them to speak out against racist or sexist or transphobic comments, for example. So these are all under development. Absolutely, the strategy as being presented is high level. I totally agree. However, we do have lots of very particular steps that are in place. When we're talking about community engagement, there's also a review that has happened and taken place for what would be perhaps a more inclusive and a more comprehensive model to engage community overall with respect to the chief's advisory committees. So that is also in process at the moment, and it's almost developed. And we're looking at just kind of the final steps to physically launch it. So lots of things that have been at play, multiple moving factors and areas, and all of that is really coming in place together, hopefully to have just a very strong impact, very much led by the grassroots, but also deeply supported by the leadership at PRP. Can you still hear me?
So we look forward to seeing more of those specific tactics that, help that implement the strategy coming forward. Okay, thank you.
Regional Chair Yanika, please.
Thank you. Michael, Salia, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. This is much more anecdotal, very non-scientific, but just to provoke a bit of a conversation on this file and this whole issue that's so important to us. And you probably know me well enough to know I can talk to anyone. So in all of my travels over the last 4 or 5 months, for whatever reason I'm with someone, if they're cutting my hair, if I'm getting a meal in a restaurant, I would raise this conversation. So what do you make about what we're watching on TV, the Black Lives Matter, equity, diversity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And number one, I think I get to what people are really thinking, because it's more disarming, because you're in a private chat, if you will. And I just want to tell you what I have found out, if you will, anecdotally, not scientifically. I am quickly coming to the conclusion that, and I'm going to be dramatic for effect, I really don't want to waste a lot of time talking to the 60, 70, 80-year-old crowd, because they're a lost cause. I think our future lies in the youth. So maybe it's time for me to get new friends, but I am dumbfounded at how many conversations start with, well, Nando, I'm not a racist, but, so now you have to brace yourself because you know what's coming. And then they will, and it's the same over, well, when we came after the war and when, et cetera. And okay, but going for, and they're trying their best, and I think they're decent, not all, trying their best to say, I want to be open-minded, I want to be fair, but there's no question there's a lifetime of inherent bias in these folks. And I don't know that that's going to change in the last 20% of their lives, though we have to try. To conclude, and this is the question I'm asking, if you ask me, Nando, you're going into a wedding hall today and you want to help the cause, I wouldn't sit at the table with the old folk. I'd sit with the young kids and have the conversation with them, because I think that's where our hope lies. Which brings me to the question. Institutionally and in terms of application, would the same apply? In other words, I know we have to train everybody on the force, and we're going to, and many of them, I'm very proud of the service and what we do. But I'm starting to think where you really have to leverage all your energy is the next crop coming in. because we'd better make sure we're hiring the right people. We better make sure we're assessing for this. I hope they have a fresher view of the world a generation or two later, but perhaps I'm just expressing my frustration that, boy, and a lot of the people that I'm talking, and it's with the best of intentions, and no one is overt and nobody is rude or insult. But then when you probe a little further, you say, man, we got a problem here. And I don't know that it's going to change in this 78-year-old person. So we still have to try. But if I had to devote resources, again, very, very subjectively, anecdotally, I'd say, Chief, damn it, make sure you're hiring the right people as they start their careers and make sure they understand this mindset. Do what we can to educate everyone. But Michael, I know it's a bit of a weird question, but you know what I'm trying to express. What are your thoughts on my experiences?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think you raise an interesting point. If you look at the science, our brains get to a point where change becomes more and more hard and more difficult for us. But I want to throw out a statistic to you, and that is in 1999, when same-sex marriage was sort of at the heat of the debate, about 42% of Canadians were believing that LGBT people should be allowed to marry. In 2016, that number was over 80%. That's not to say that we got rid of 40% of Canadians. That's not what happened. But people's opinions evolved, and they continue to evolve. I'd like to believe that people can and do evolve. When we're looking at work around diversity and inclusion, we use a model of identifying individuals called the 5 Fs. And it goes from foe, fighter, fence sitter, friend, family. It helps us to identify where a person is on a change management perspective. And the vast majority of individuals are fence sitters. And our job, Soleil's job, the committee's job, is to help people move one step along that change management model. I don't think it's a fair assessment to say that all young people are necessarily as woke, if you will. Certainly, as we've seen in some of the protests in the United States and here in Canada, there were young people on both sides of the protests with some pretty strong feelings. I don't think we're going to change everybody's mind, but at least we can start to help them to chip away, to become more sympathetic and empathetic towards their fellow citizens. I think from a recruiting perspective, we should always recruit the best and brightest. But we should also remember that the best and brightest come in different packages. And the best and brightest won't always look like me. And we need to have a service that is reflective of the citizenry that we are protecting. So I think it's a fine balance. And I understand your point, and I don't disagree. I mean, believe me, there are some people that I think, yeah, you're good. I'm not wasting any time on you. But there are a lot of people that I think, okay, this is an educational moment, and I'm going to bring you along a bit. And then it's up to the individual as to whether or not they want to grow and develop and learn. And that's ultimately our goal in all of this.
So if I may add,
Please.
one quick thing, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So policing context, of course, is very unique in the way the culture really plays a very, very significant role. And when I'm talking about culture, we tend to manage the way we were managed, and we tend to lead the way we were led. So if it has been very directive, which policing has been very directive, where we were told what to do and how to do it, and so clearly when we're looking at implementing some sort of systemic change or a culture shift that is going to require that everybody does come on board and recognize why it is even essential. I know there's usually this focus on training. Training is a tool. It is an effective tool, but it's definitely not the answer to every single thing that we're going to do. So kind of going back to the tactical side as well, there are lots of strategic, planned moves, initiatives, which involve everybody. The idea, of course, is that all collectively within PRP are going to look at the vision and look at the mission of why we're doing what we're doing. When we're looking at safety as being our core crux of the service, then safety includes not just the physical safety, but also the psychological safety and the cultural safety and the entire kind of the environmental context around it. So it's definitely a long conversation. And I know just 10 seconds or 15 seconds of this is not going to be enough. So I'm very willing to sit down with any of the board members and we can have these conversations at an easier pace for all.
Okay. My last thought, and thank you, Michael, you prompted maybe a better way for me articulating it. I must say on the hopeful side, many people that I'm sure I'm speaking to that might have earlier in their lives been vehemently anti-LGBT, for example, maybe have moved along the spectrum to being tolerant. And that's what I was finding in many that, you know, I guess the world has changed and I will tolerate it, not using that language. And I'm saying, no, we need to do much more than that. We need to embrace and welcome. So I guess the good news is I know we're moving along that continuum, but boy, at times I still think we have a really long way to go. So maybe I'm just voicing some frustration.
Sure.
There you have it. The other thought I had, you're right. So, you know, the attitudes may have changed, but as you said, from 1997, I think it said to 2017, that represents a generation of people we lost and another generation that have moved in that kind of to my point. But for what it's worth, colleagues, that is my observation. That I don't want to say I'm disappointed, but I've really become far more aware of how some of these views are entrenched. And as I say, I don't think I want to hear one more person say I'm not a racist, but because then you know what's coming out of their mouth. Well, you just proved your point that you, but anyway, thank you for that.
I think we might have lost Chair Chata.
Maybe we lost the chair, so I think I saw Len's hand go up. Len, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Michael and Nando, for putting it into perspective. I think you bring forward some very valid points, and certainly we're all opposed to change as we get older. Michael, your analogy about the 4 Fs certainly puts it into perspective for me, although I think I'd be inclined to add one further F: full fighter, fence sitter, and family. Perhaps one further analogy might be appropriate, and that might be fearful. I think society has put so much challenge on change that sometimes people are really afraid to say what their position is. And rather than say it, they may acquiesce and simply go along with it. And I think it's a step that sometimes gets confusing where people are. And rather than say they're racist or they have an opinion on that, they simply say nothing. And it creates so much confusion and problems where we're at these days. And I think that might help clarify it as well, maybe that 5th F. And thank you for your clarification, Nando and Michael. Excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you raise an excellent point, and that this is for some people, it's very fearful work. And we live in certainly a heightened sensitivity around the words we use, and a fear of getting called out. And there are so many examples of people being called out and organizations being called out, and that creates a resistance for some people. I think the best thing we can do is, to some extent, take some of the emotion out of it. And I realize that's contradictory to this work, but this is about long-term systemic change. It's not about the emotional reaction of a moment. George Floyd's death impacted, I'm sure, everyone who's seen that video in deeply emotional ways. And the immediate gut reaction was very strong. And we're now getting to the point of saying, okay, now let's look at the systemic change and do the work to make sure that there isn't another George Floyd. So thank you for your comment.
If I may just step in, I think the most important and the most significant side of, especially if we're looking at the 5 Fs, it is the behavior element at the end of it is people need to have the courage to step forward. People need to have the courage when we're talking about those fence sitters that we need to be focusing on, as Michael is speaking about. Then obviously we're looking at competency-based development, a skill-based development for individuals, so that not only do they have the awareness and understanding and self-awareness, but also that they recognize that there are ways that they can feel comfortable and safe and yet put an opposing point of view forward. Some of the things, though, I would say, and this is a very personal opinion, is this is towards now the end of 2020. And if we are going to continue to very gently walk on eggshells around, identifying racism or calling out anti-Black racism or speaking about privilege or recognizing that there are issues around a structure that is inherently and institutions that are inherently supported by a very supremacistic view, then I think we are going to continue to have exactly the same conversation 40 from now. And I think it's imperative that we need to move the dial a little bit forward and for moving forward in a sense to recognizing that we do have the capacity internally at PRP. My experience so far with the membership that I have met, uniform, civilian, they're so excited about moving forward. They're so completely thrilled about making this shift to a better service internally and to a better service externally as well. So I know that we are definitely in the right path. And if there are any suggestions, Mayor, from yourself and others in terms of this certain kind of tactics that you would like to see us implement, please, again, I'd put it out. Feel free to reach out to me and let me know. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Any other question or comment? Chief?
No, and in the absence of any other comments or questions, I just want to thank Michael and Salia. And behind them is a broad team. They're listed in your slide deck that has significant impact within the organization credibility. And I want to reiterate that there is a tremendous amount of support behind this. And Michael's right, this is the beginning. It's a roadmap. Today's board meeting is really several big chunks of systemic change, which I want to say to the board, you should all, take stock and revel in, because it's been you that's commissioned this. You brought this work forward. You brought me here and a brand new team, and we're not stopping. And this is a big piece of our multi-year sustainable plan. And I just need you all to understand that it has the highest level of support from this organization. Salia is right. Our people that we're onboarding, this next class of 50 plus recruits, not just because they're visibly 50% gender balanced, highly racialized, but there's such depth to them from an individual level, regardless of their visible diversity, that is going to be, to board member Unika's comments, is going to make this sustainable 30 years out. That's a legacy piece. So again, thank you. We're just beginning on this, and we're happy to quite publicly present this to you, and we're looking forward to executing it. I agree, Salia, we can find ways to give dashboard updates to the board members about what's actually happening, and we look forward to doing that. So thank you very much.
Okay, if any question or no question by anybody else, further discussions, we will now move to receive this presentation. May I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Mr. Howell, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, this is approved. Now we move on to Peel Regional Police Service Delivery Review. Our second presentation today is from the Chief and Mr. Charles Pate from PricewaterhouseCoopers, who will present the results of the Peel Regional Police Efficiency Review conducted by PwC. We will wait until the end of the presentation and then open for questions. Reminder to please put up your hand. So now, Charles, our Chief, whoever is going to share the screen with the presentation, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I believe Charles is going to share the screen while I provide some introductory comments. So, I'm really hoping that we have public dialing in and watching this virtually in addition to our local media, if not broader, because this is in keeping with our, big pieces moving forward to show the momentum that we are relentlessly pursuing here is the outcome of something very significant, which you'll recall on September 27, 2019, when Chief McCord was still in the chair and I was sort of shadowing him. The board asked the chief to undertake a comprehensive review of the current operating service delivery model. And just to take you back, this was the impetus, as you recall, was really from, the public saying to us, they want to see more of our footprint. We have a commitment to serve this diverse region geographically, individually, community-wise, to meet its needs. And, we wanted clarity amidst sort of discussions on bricks and mortar from a real, I think the board really framed it appropriately. This is not just about a facilities plan. This is about how we have officers at people's doorstep, how we see them policing, the number of officers, what their role and function is, and making sure we meet the needs of this growing region. And I think calling it a service delivery review was the most appropriate thing. And I'd like to introduce to you both Dominic Belmonte, who's the management consulting leader for PwC, and also Mr. Charles Payette, the national manager for the policing sector. Now, I should first say, Charles and I and Dominic are going to sort of co-present this because, we are sincerely invested in this project. And you'll see that we've triggered a lot of activities as a result. Now, just a side note that Charles and I go quite a ways back. Charles is very, very well connected across the policing sector here nationally and internationally, right to the UK. He was formerly the senior policy advisor to Minister Tobolo and Minister Jones, well known across police leaders. And to have him at PwC was one of the key reasons we wanted his line of sight with the broader project team to see this work. And we really look forward to doing that and highlighting the objectives of the project. You have a really deep report with you with 16 key objectives, which we'll go to. But I just want to introduce to you Dominic and Charles, and I will comment on some of the key outcomes as you see, but what you'll find is a real launch pad for us to do some key activities, which we've already begun on, which I believe will speak to some of the impetus behind the report. So Charles, I think I'm handing it over to you right now.
Thank you, Chief. I will pass it along to Dominic to start.
Yeah, just a few. So thank you so much, Charles and Chief, for the opportunity to present our report to the board this morning. I wanted maybe to just spend just one quick second on just contextualizing the review itself and really ground it into the focus of what our review was, which is really essentially to assess the services divisional and deployment model, and with the ambition or the aim to optimize the community, just to optimize the presence within the community, specifically to increase overall capacity to the field operation units, look to improve the integration between operation and the infrastructure teams within the service, and really a focus of trying to deploy more resources to coordinate activities within the community. So that really was the context and sort of the main objectives of what we were trying to sort of focus on, which is in the context of some of the opening remarks that the Chief has presented. What we'll be presenting today is just a really quick overview of the approach that we took to assess the current capacity and capability relative to these objectives, and really help inform some of the objectives and recommendation themes, which we'll share with you today. And then spend a bit of time around how we plan or potentially what would be the roadmap in terms of some of the implementation activities that were identified as part of this review, and then hopefully open it up for any questions and discussion along the way. So with that, I'll turn it over to Charles, and he'll start the presentation for us. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Chief. First, I would like to say that I'm extremely happy to be in front of you, in front of this board, to present you this the service delivery report. And one of the main reasons why we are co-presenting with the Chief is not only about the presentation, it's about our approach to this report was in collaboration with every single sector areas of the organization. Without having that collaborative approach, we would have not been able to provide this report to you, that it's in depth, highlighting key areas of improvement of the organization. Our approach for the service was based on a total of 10 interviews, including 30 people sitting in key strategic position of the organization that were in position to provide us with not only corporate knowledge, but deep knowledge of challenges that the organization is facing on a daily basis. Our team of analysts reviewed over 31 plus documents, deep dive into nitty-gritty deployment model, HR model, the crime stats. We went over a lot of documents. And finally, to put different perspective, we went through leading policing practices, not only in Canada, but also outside of the country. Our first step was to provide the command team with a current state analysis and a gap report. The current state analysis highlighted the divisional model, included crime stats, call volume, looked at the location, and also looked at areas of improvement. We then provided a final report that included a list of initiatives, high-level business case, and then a roadmap, and I would say an actionable roadmap that, as of today, PRP Command Team already actioned many of the recommendations that we will present to you today. At the beginning of the review, it was extremely important to hear from the command team and the chief. What were the strategic teams for the organization? It was clearly highlighted and mentioned and focused on the need for community policing and mobilization, strategic management, infrastructure and innovation, business administration, and frontline policing. Throughout the reviews, these 5 teams have been at the forefront of every initiatives, analysis, and review of activities. We wanted to make sure that the review and the report that we are presenting to the board was reflecting of the vision of the command team. The final report includes a list of recommendations. We divided these recommendations in 6, let's say, dimensions. The first one is the focus on community policing and mobilization, as mentioned. It is strongly recommended to the organization to align every key activities through the community safety and well-being plan. The strategic plan has to reflect the community safety and well-being plan, and not only, I would say, patrol has to reflect this, but every single units, every single areas of the organization, the community safety and well-being plan has to be a key driver for activities in the future. The adoption of key performance indicators for patrol officers. The uniform patrol in the 4 divisions, the development of these key performance indicators should include community engagement, community policing activities. To facilitate the empowerment of frontline policing, Our review highlighted the need for a deep review of the workload measurements of specialty bureaus and CIBs to reduce the number of temporary transfers that impact frontline patrol. As you know, frontline patrol receive temporary transfers sent to CIBs, and that create a gap in frontline of divisions. It is deeply recommended that not only the development of these measures went across the CIBs and investigative bureaus, but also in divisions. The development of a people-centric approach culture focused on diversity and inclusion across the organization. And we were really pleased to hear and see that the organization is moving quite fast and committed on that recommendation. When we looked at how to optimize the service delivery of policing in the region of Peel, it was clear, especially with the ask of the board to look at the brick and mortar, that there was a perception that the footprint was not necessarily as visible. Police officers do not operate from buildings. Police officers are already on the street. And then it is in our review, a service review highlighted the need to implement and develop alternative service delivery models of policing. Policing in the 21st century should and must include online services, digital policing platforms, and throughout our review, we highlighted a significant opportunity for the organization to leverage the current facilities to increase community presence, reducing the need for substation or community station, or you probably heard the term pop-up stations. When we looked at optimizing these buildings, the current facilities, we really focused on the 4 divisions model, and we included the airport division, too often seen as not an operational division. I think, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, you already started conversation with the GTA.
That's correct, Charles. And for the awareness of the board members, the idea of being responsible to our community, our taxpayers, our budget, and utilizing or leveraging existing assets was a very key theme. And one thing we heard quite loud is certain elements of the community needed more presence from us. And a real opportunity was looking at what is now the GTA Airport Division, which is just an internal deployment model. As you know, we'll speak to it later in the agenda. But using that structure as a launch pad to police the surrounding community as an asset. We've began, I myself, along with Deputy Andrews and his team, have spoke to the executives right from the new CEO of the GTAA at what opportunities we could use that as a footprint to police the surrounding community. And so that's already begun. And it would be a great, just an opportunity to step right across the road into a community that really is desirous of us. Another example of that is also the beginning of the culture assessment, which has been spoken to not just in the CCDI piece, but in our organizational one, which Deputy Andrews has also began commissioning. So these are those things that are already in the green as a result of this work.
One thing that I would add on that, and this is something that comes often when we talk to community and police executives, that notion of brick and mortar and that sense of safety. We do not develop relationship with the community by building a building. We develop relationships with communities by having significant interactions. The community pop-up stations that reduce I'm referring to not a fully operational divisions that actually house these officers and where the officers are deployed. We are referring to pop-up station, community station for where people are walking in to file reports. And I will cite the example of the Metropolitan London Police when they went through that austerity measures and they had to literally move forward with alternative delivery of policing. And this is where a recommendation lies into exploring means for the community to feel connected with police, with PRP, but with police officers, the ability to connect easily with the community. We then moved that actually the previous recommendation tied with our facility and infrastructure, where we are, when we looked at the divisional model, we heard loud and clear that the 4-divisional model has been put in place a long time ago and that the region of Peel is growing extremely fast. The need of a substation was clearly reflected, but that the answer was our recommendation actually suggested that we are recommending Peel to proceed with the assessment of the construction of a new division, a fully operational division that would then move to the 4 model to a 5 model division. The assessment of centralizing detention facilities. And one thing that we heard from a lot of senior officers is that COVID brought a new process for prisoner management that reduced the risk for the organization. And this was really highlighted by superintendent and divisions as a pressure and a risk on a day-to-day basis when it comes to prisoner transportation. When we looked at leveraging strategic management to increase the efficiency, and efficiency is quite a broad term, one of the challenges that we faced through our review was the data, certain pieces of data that we were receiving. It was clear after looking and discussing with police executives at Peel that the need to establish a clear and strong data management practice and data and analytics would actually not only support the command team in the development of future strategy, but also provide clear data to the board and the community on what is happening in the organization. This feed into the creation of BI capability from not only from a business perspective, but from an operational perspective. The ability for the organization to rely on data and analytics to distribute resources effectively across the organization. BI can be seen as a key from a finance perspective, but also from an operational perspective when it comes to the management of frontline policing on a day-to-day basis. All of this has to be supported by the development of a comprehensive technology strategy. And when we talk about a comprehensive technology strategy, we're not simply talking about a roadmap of initiatives. We quickly realized that the organization needs a strong governance model when it comes to the prioritization of all of the strategic initiatives that the organization is going through. Technology can be used as a means to connect effectively, quickly, real time with the community, and develop stronger relations across the organization as well in the data sharing. The implementation of integrated platforms where there is no different platforms all across the organization that are not integrated or connected to each other, and for the command team and senior officers to receive reliable real-time data to support decision-making. Sorry, Chief, go.
Thank you, Charles. And just to, for the board, right from the start, has had a vision to be leaders in technology and innovation. And I need to reiterate from Charles' standpoint, it's not just to have the shiny new things. It's to act as a vehicle to better serve our public and our community. And having data, information, analytics is not new. I think I've used that term before, that the movie Moneyball came out about 22 years ago, and policing is just now catching up with business intelligence. But it's a key element to service delivery, which we're going to see. One thing, again, I'd like to highlight is that the outcome of this report that PwC is presenting to us is not one that's going to sit on the shelf. We've already actioned, and as the board would already probably have in your calendar, we are going to solicit feedback from you as well to establish this technology strategy and roadmap. That will be our technology playbook for everything that's going to come out of these next several years. And again, that's one that Deputy O'Doherty has carriage of, as well as the other deputies who have different pieces as well. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Chief. Well, when we submitted the final report of the service delivery review, the report included a list of 15 initiatives to address the areas of improvement that were highlighted in the review. We took these 15 initiatives and developed that prioritization framework, always focused on the priorities, the strategic priorities of the organization. The priorities, when we talk about a prioritization framework, we looked at the impact that these initiatives would have not only on the short term for the organization, but on the medium and long term as well. All these initiatives were developed, and I really want to put emphasis, these initiatives were developed in close collaboration with command team and senior officers. It was a teamwork to deep into not only the classic innovative initiatives that we would hear in other police services, but initiatives that were outside the box, addressing relevant issues that the organization is facing. These initiatives were then prioritized and then put into a roadmap. And what was a key ask by the chief and our executive sponsor to this project, Deputy Chief Randy Patrick, was this roadmap had to be actionable. This roadmap had to be something that the organization can then take and start moving. We use the methodology crawl, walk, run for each initiatives. And I have to say, I had the pleasure to work with many police organizations, and I can tell you that working on a report, knowing the report will just be put on the back shelf, is not as motivating. The first thing I noticed is how quickly the organization took the report and start crawling, walking, and running, probably all at the same time. And then we have now Deputy Mark Andrews leading a culture assessment. As mentioned, we have Deputy O'Doherty leading the technology innovation strategy, and we have Deputy Nick Milinovich looking deep in establishing a dedicated, centralized, intimate partner and family violence unit. And we submitted the report in June, and we are in August. So for the board, I think it's extremely important to realize how this organization, and for us as PwC, having a client so dedicated in change and actions, it was simply a pleasure to see and pleasure to work with. On my last note here, I would like to really highlight 3 key members of your organization that without them, this report would have not been that complete. The service delivery review was under the leadership of Deputy Chief Randy Patrick. We had the amazing support of Superintendent Sean Gumley and then Inspector Barbara Smith. We are really pleased to present you this report, the service delivery review. And Chief, would you like to have the closing notes here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Charles and Dom. And we know we're going to have questions from the board. Again, the real detailed report is within the board material. And I think when you get to page 25, you can see the 16 specific initiatives that have their individual business cases, right from working on people, the organization, process, data and technology, and then ultimately facilities, which is what prompted this. And, you know, to loop back to the board, it speaks very specifically to the issues that prompted us. Our roadmap for what we're not going to do with pop-up stations moving forward, how to service, you know, the northern end of this region more adequately, potentially with the development of a fifth division, as well as utilizing existing assets in North Mississauga, the GTAA. But the, you know, what comes along with that is the people part and how we utilize and evolve people. And all of these aspects are being commissioned as we speak. They're already on the go. And we're thankful again for the board's direction back in September. Despite COVID and the pandemic, this project did not stop. It was a very lengthy project. And this will be another one which we will commit to updating the board on as to how we are executing the strategic roadmap. So thank you, Charles and Dominic from PwC alongside us and getting us there. You're absolutely right. We have a team that's not waiting. We are pushing this organization sort of relentlessly, and this is one platform. So Chair Chata, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Pate and Chief. Board members, any question, comments? Floor is open for that. If there's any discussion regarding this, if not, then we'll now move to receive the presentation. May I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Mayor Brown.
It's Mayor Crombie. I'm happy to.
Sure. Mayor Crombie, we're having a hard time in your voice is not coming clear.
I had my waving at the
Sorry, Mayor Crombie, could you please repeat? Right? And now we can hear you. Can you please repeat?
Sort of. I was kind of waving at you. Okay, better? What now? Is it better?
Yes. It's getting better now.
You know what? Here, I'll take my video off. Can you hear me now better?
Yes, we can.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say to PwC and to the chief, it was a great report. Thank you. There's a lot to digest there and some great recommendations. It was very fulsome, and I think it provides a great path forward. So I'm happy to move it, Chair.
Thank you. And seconded by Mayor Brown, as I saw earlier. All
Chair.
in favor? Sorry, Mr. Atia, go ahead.
A good question for the chief. Has these recommendations, have they kind of have they been integrated into the strategic plan that's being worked on?
So thank you for the question, Mr. Atia. Yes, they are part of our strategic plan. If you look at the broad buckets, I guess for thematically, people, culture, organization, innovation, and facilities, they'll fall as subsets of our strat plan. In fact, interestingly enough, things like facilities are almost a legislated, and IT are legislated components, part of our strat plan. So they will all find their way in this whole ecosystem to make sure that they're reflected. And Deputy O'Duarty and I chatted about that. So we will, Anthony, I think if you want to speak, but they're all mirrored in our strat plan roadmap for sure.
Thanks, Chief. Certainly the team has focused on the service delivery review and recommendations, and then in a wholesome aspect have contributed towards a strat plan in these larger buckets. And we'll be pleased to present you a draft report on that shortly.
Okay, if no further question, as I already said, moved by Mayor Brown, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? This is approved. Just would like to make a quick correction. On the previous presentation, the CCDI presentation was moved by Mayor Brown and seconded by Mayor Crombie. So that will be reflecting in the minute. Mistakenly, I said moved by Mr. Howell. So now we move on to the new business. Item number 5, purchasing provision of a body-worn camera solution / digital evidence management system for Peel Regional Police, direct negotiation. Chief, would you or someone on your team like to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair. And I will turn it over to Deputy O'Duarty, who, as you recall, at our last board meeting was able to provide a presentation to the board from which we received direction to come back to you today with what our projected budget would look like. Again, I won't duplicate Anthony's comments, but you'll see that we have a projection from Axon, which will be inclusive of our digital evidence management system, as well as a body-worn camera. And I think the key message also at the end of this is well within our existing budget for annually for 5 years, which will have no impact on our operating budget, in such that it'll be completely absorbed for the next 5 years. And we, as you also will have seen, some of you noticed, Toronto Police Services Board also received a similar report this past week. We're very pleased in that regard to be a leader again, coming out in front with your direction in this regard. And I'll turn it over to Anthony to speak to the details.
Okay, thank you, Chief, and good morning to the board. And in the theme of progressive movement on the heels of the service delivery review, we have undertaken certainly our innovation and technology strategy and roadmap. And no doubt that one of the items on the innovation and technology roadmap will be a comprehensive digital evidence management solution. And that was presented to you at the last board meeting. Part of the digital evidence management solution is a body-worn camera item. And I forget what commercial that was, but there's this saying, you can't have one without the other. And that's certainly true when it comes to body-worn camera and digital evidence management. And so the report that you have before you is just really an augmented report that indicates at a high level our initial discussions with Axon for procurement of a body-worn digital evidence management solution falls well within the Peel Regional Police capital budget over a 5-year period. I might also, just in case you're wondering, tell you that it is certainly in line with the recently released TPS report on their camera and digital evidence management solution as well. So similar, very similar vein. So we look forward to now moving towards a more directed negotiation where we flesh out the details of what that will look like, and doing it in an expedient time and expedient fashion, and hoping to get cameras on our folks soon with the permission of the board, but also establishing that foundation and pillar of a digital evidence management system, the infrastructure that's required to support this initiative on body-worn camera and other initiatives that we will be moving forward with this year and in the coming year or two.
Okay, anybody has any question or comment to make? Mr. Howell, Mayor Crombie after.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Just the two concerns we had before, I just wanted to confirm, is the actual ownership of the data, and in other words, that we're not married to the company, that, for instance, if you changed in 5 years to another supplier, and your unabided, restricted access to the data. Is there any concerns about that?
No, in fact, many years ago, we had this concern about who owns the data, where is the data located, where is it stored? And certainly we can tell you that PRP owns the data, will always own their data, and the access to the data will always be at the behest of the PRP.
So would we actually contain the storage devices that hold the data, or would it be a cloud-based data off-site somewhere?
It would be software as a solution type of setup, which means that it would be a cloud-based storage.
So an independent third storage facility?
That's correct.
And the privacy of the officers for totally non-related instance, that would be still not a concern for private conversation during the daytime?
Well, it will always, sir, I understand your question. It will always be a concern, certainly. There will be strict policy and guidelines built around that. There'll be redaction. There will be guidelines that are consistent with MFIPA relating to any disclosure, but privacy of the officer is ultimately at the forefront of this, as well as privacy of our community.
What I'm referring to is that assuming that no incident happens during officers' regular daytime, there'd be nobody monitoring their conversations.
Yeah, Anthony, can you speak to the security of the cloud-based technology, digital, and potentially over our own PSBN, as well as the fact, or at least some clarity on the federal levels, DOJ using the same cloud-based systems? I think Mr. Howell just wants some assurance as it relates to the security of that information back and forth on a daily basis.
Thank you, Chief.
Certainly, thanks. Well, first I'll touch on another concurrent project that we have ongoing here in Peel in partnership with other agencies, and that's the establishment of our own private LTE network, our own private data network. And once fully established here in Peel, we're well on our way. In fact, and accelerating that since my arrival, is that we will have established our own private, secure, resilient, reliable network for data, in which that system, the data that will travel throughout Peel will be in that secure atmosphere within Peel region, of course. Of course, on the storage side of it, it will be sent to the cloud. And at that point, it will be on a secure platform, which is being utilized by many other agencies, right from federal police services to D&D to other agencies within the country. It is a very secure platform. And anytime we need the data, that data will be pulled down in a similar fashion. So the security of that, we are very confident in, and there has been privacy impact assessments done, not just by TPS on their body-worn camera initiative, but by other services which we have piggybacked on. We will also do our own and ensure that the privacy standards in that realm are met as well, sir.
Thank you. Mayor Crombie?
Hopefully you can hear me this time. Let me know. Okay,
Yes.
good. So just quickly, so Axon is the same company that Toronto will be using. Are they sole sourcing it as well?
TPS released their report. They went through a RFP process and selected Axon.
Okay, great. And we talked a lot about the data storage. My question was going to be, how long will it be stored? It can't be indefinitely, I would assume.
That's a great question. And that's something that we are working on actually defining, depending on records retention schedules that we currently have implemented here at PRP. So as we review our own records retention schedule, we will also make sure that the data storage, wherever it is, here on-prem or in the cloud, depending on what we implement and how we implement it, that it will not be retained forever.
And so will the information gathered actually be put in people's files as well?
I'm sorry, Mayor Crombie, could you just...
So will the information that's gathered, say there's video of an incident that you're just gathering information or gathering evidence, will that go into an individual's file for future use or consideration?
What will generally happen with any of the evidence that's gathered, if it is associated to an occurrence, it will be kept and it will be utilized for that occurrence. So yes, a file would be a proper term to use for that. Until, of course, it's no longer needed, and then it would be purged according to records retention schedules.
How will we know if it's no longer needed?
Depending on the case, if it is a criminal court matter that has been dispensed with over a number of years and then after has achieved the records retention schedule, it could be purged at that time. There are so many fluctuations in the records retention schedule depending on the needs of what the actual data or evidence is for. There's certainly different schedules.
Because I think we need to consider all those issues that were raised during the Sidewalk Labs debate with the collection of data and, you know, the storage, the security of it, et cetera. Similar issues we should be concerned about, right? And what about transfer of the data or the videos, the information to courts? Will they have to be subscribed, or is a video forwarded? How will that information gather, that evidence be forwarded to the courts?
Part of the solution for the court evidence is integrated within the solution that we're looking at right now. Okay. So if I can just walk you through a simple scenario that an officer goes to a call, investigates a matter, obtains some evidence, some of which may be obtained by body cam, others by other forms of digital evidence that's gathered. It would be stored in this solution. And then from there, a package, a crown brief like you would see today in common policing would be put together, except this package would be digital. That package would then be accessible through a partnership with our partners over at the court, and they would receive that package as a digital package. From there, our justice partners on MEG would be able to share the disclosure of that with defense counsel seamlessly. And not sort of in the same manner that we do now, which is hard copy or burning DVDs. Certainly there's a significant cost savings to that. I did see the chief want to weigh in as well.
Yep. Sure.
No, and I think just to sort of double down on that, the province right now is in the tail end of a procurement cycle where they are looking at a digital evidence management system to support that court integration piece. So we're quite eager because we are going to be one of the first few police agencies in Ontario to have our end sort of framed up. And the integration with the province would be a really good opportunity to demonstrate that integration point, Mayor Crombie. So we're looking forward to it.
And one of the largest two police forces that where it will be in use. I don't know if we'll roll it out before Toronto does, and if we given any consideration to the rollout. And we're going to face a lot of scrutiny, right? So we have to be as transparent as possible about the rollout, and need to be very public. Now we know what the costs are to us, but will we be studying metrics and effectiveness? And we would have to be very public about that too. So what metrics are we looking at? How will we know that use of BWCs has been successful for us? Will we decide what those metrics will be?
No, we haven't, to be quite honest. As we work through the possibilities and the rollout, then we will be able to develop both our KPIs and KPRs, our key performance results and indicators, and then be able to assess that. That is not only a consideration from PRP, Mayor Crombie, but is an absolute must as we roll out this program. So we will define those and report back. I think another important element just to touch on, and you've raised the issue, is the inclusion of our community members into the rollout and how they would like to see body-worn cameras and digital evidence management be rolled out by the PRP. And in the current technology and innovation roadmap that you heard Mr. Charles Payette speak about just moments ago, we talked about developing a connected community. And we certainly are furthering that now. One of the initial steps that we have already undertaken with body-worn camera was to sort of poll, not sort of, we did poll the community at a recent town hall event. And I would remind the board that there was approximately or just over 80% acceptance of a body-worn camera implementation. Now, that's only as good as the rollout and the measurements and the inclusivity of our community in doing that. So it is a big part of our plan, and it's also a large portion of our change management plan within our service as well.
Right. So are we ahead of the curve with TPS, or will we have some, will we synchronize with them and roll it out as a entire GTHA region? And do we know what they're doing? Does it differ from where we are? I think we're a little bit ahead of them, right, in the procurement process?
Well, that depends on the board after today, to be honest with you. But we are certainly on track to roll out digital evidence management solution fairly quickly. In fact, my staff officer here already is piloting a portion of that on behalf of the service. The body-worn camera, we would say we really need to direct negotiate with this vendor now. And depending on how Toronto rolls them out, we're not too far ahead or we're not too far behind, Mayor. I would love to say that we are ahead, but I just don't know at this point.
Could there be any cost savings if we did a joint order?
That will be explored, certainly. I can tell you right now, in comparison to the public report that was put out by TPS, we certainly are in line with that.
I think the public rollout will be very important, and I think we'll need to do more stakeholder consultation on that. I know the issue came up and we discussed it, and that very broad consultation we did with 17,000 people, but I think we'll need to go back and discuss it further and then also discuss the metrics that we'll need to put in place. So I'm happy to move it. I support it. I know Mayor Brown does as well. So I know that we've been talking about this for some time and would like to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Brown wants to comment. I saw his hand.
Thank you, Chair Chatha, and be happy to move or second this with Mayor Crombie. I am glad that Chief Nisha has moved so quickly on this, and I want to commend the Chief for recognizing this was important. We heard a large outcry for more transparency and accountability, and the fact that this has happened so quickly, I think speaks to the fact of how nimble our chief is to respond to concerns that exist around transparency. So a few of the questions, for those that don't know about Axon, I understand their customers were Calgary, Fredericton, Medicine Hat, Saskatchewan, Kentville. That's across the country. Are they really the only significant player when it comes to this type of technology with policing right now in Canada?
That's our understanding. There are other vendors certainly that can offer a body-worn camera. Again, I'll harken back to the foundation of the digital evidence management system that is being offered. We feel, and obviously TPS and many other agencies across Canada, North America, and the world feel that is the best foundation to build not only a body-worn camera solution, but again, I must emphasize that we have many more strategies and digital technologies that this has to work with, including our data collection and our data analysis that we feel will be the best fit.
So the follow-up on that is because these seem to be the forces I know that are using body-worn cameras. Are there any large municipalities in Canada that use another vendor? Because it seems to be the same list.
Yes, to be quite honest with you, I can't answer that. Off the top of my head, I don't know of another vendor, another agency using another vendor, but there very well could be. I could get you that information.
And the next question I had is, I've been asked this by a number of people who seem to be pleased about the notion of this accountability measure and transparency measure. But so I understand how many, there's 1,200 end users. Does that cover all police officers? And if there's an officer that's not covered, if you could explain to the board why they wouldn't be covered. I think one of the concerns where people are saying body-worn cameras are great, but are there going to be loopholes or exemptions where we wouldn't have that type of transparency? And so 1,200 end users, who does it not cover?
Well, it does cover all uniform officers in Peel Region frontline officers. The 1,200 users are licenses really, and those licenses would cover all uniform officers, frontline officers. There is also, in the package, you will see there is also a provision for extra licenses for those in administrative positions so that they can access the evidence.com, which is the solution where we redact evidence and assemble court packages, analyze the data and evidence, and work with that. And so there's extra licenses built in to cover the entire service. So there will not be a frontline officer on the street without a camera.
Okay, and so there's no exemptions to that?
At this time, we haven't built the strict policy around that. Our vision is that all frontline officers responding to calls, all officers in the community will have a camera.
Okay. And so in cases where that we've, some of the incidents we've talked about recently as a board, those would have been covered. And so that there would have been, that would be an example where those officers would have been considered frontline, like in the cases of Ijaz Chaudhry or DeAndre Campbell, those would have been considered frontline officers.
Yes, sir, absolutely. I was going to answer that very directly. Those are certainly the cases that would have been captured and that we intend on capturing. Absolutely.
And so just so I think you've already answered this, but just so I can confidently answer this when community members ask me, is there a tactical unit that would not be considered frontline, or would a tactical unit be considered frontline? Is there like a gun and gang unit that wouldn't be considered frontline? But I know sometimes there's different units that your leadership team builds, and so would they also fall into this category?
That's a great question. In terms of tactical units and gun and gang units, those are discussions internally and externally, to the Mayor Crombie's point, that we need to really define. Generally, they are considered frontline, but not in terms of frontline call response. So we really need to define what that is and what that looks like. Hey, I'd like to tell you this: we want to be, to Mayor Crombie's point, not only the first to deploy it, and that may or may not happen, but we want to deploy it as most effectively as we can. And if that means sort of changing the narrative on who wears it, then we'll do that. But we haven't had those intrinsic discussions, and certainly we will be consulting with the community on just those points, Mayor Brown.
Excellent. Okay, well, this is very encouraging, and once again, thank you to the chief for moving so quickly on this, and look forward to supporting this.
Okay, board members, anybody else has any question or comment to make? If not, then we already have this recommendation to approve, moved by Mayor Crombie, seconded by Mayor Brown. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, this is approved. So next item we have is Ontario Human Rights Commission progress update on initiatives taken in partnership with the OHRC. Chief, would you or someone from your team would like to speak on this?
Thank you, Chair Chadha, and I'll be speaking to this particular report. As you know, it is a walk-on report, and it is an information report, essentially saying that I'm going to be coming back to you in September with, at this point, we hope to have the Human Rights Commission by our side to really, speak to a historic, I'm going to say historic set of activities that we are in discussions with in regards to a real systemic and structural change that we intend on taking here. So I guess let me first say that Board Member Atia, who's the chair of our governance committee, and the governance committee would be have a little bit of a teaser as it relates to this in our last meeting. The minutes would be contained within the in-camera portion. However, I just want to say that I think globally, the public has said to us, post George Floyd, post our tragic incidents here locally, and the broader discussion and narrative on systemic racism across all systems, but inclusive of policing, is that the public is tired of hearing leaders or individuals, systems say, we're going to change or we're going to make change. When I arrived here, one of the first things I did was began speaking with the Human Rights Commissioner back in January of this year. We discussed opportunities where we could really do something meaningful here that would put us in the eyes of our community, open and transparent and accountable to them with you, the board. And this doubles back, the board report you have indicates that in September 2019, the Human Rights Commission produced a policy on eliminating racial profiling in law enforcement. And that really had 7 key principles. And that got sent to all 4850 chiefs here in Ontario, the First Nations and policing chiefs. And the president of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, on behalf of every police service in Ontario, said, hey, we endorse these 7 principles. We don't know how they're going to look like if a chief adopted them, but we endorse them. And the 7 principles are in this board report. And they're first, the acknowledgement that substantively that racial profiling, the impact on the community, systemic racism exists. It exists in all systems. It exists in policing. The second is that we engage in meaningful engagement with the community, and Mayor Crombie and Mayor Brown and Chair Unica, you know this, we really want to do that, not just with our traditional advisory groups, but in a new, meaningful way with the new voices that have come forward. But it also looks at our structural things. Have we changed policy? Is policy all speak with an EDI and human rights centric focused lens? And we're willing to take that work on to look at policy guidance. The fourth, which is really key, is data collection. And it's come to the forefront in Toronto. We saw the report that came out, an analysis by an academic for the last several years up to 2017. And let's be honest, that I think every chief in Ontario will agree, we don't know what we don't know because we have never collected it purposefully and meaningfully. And so number 4 is a commitment to really put the systems in place so that we can analyze and look at proactively if there is disproportionate activity with any particular community and report it to you, the board. And 5, 6, and 7 are, really putting them accountability and monitoring pieces in and making it sustainable. And you can see this overlaps with, the CCDI, EDI roadmap, which talks about it good on the inside because it will be good on the outside, but that multi-year action plan right from the technology piece that we're embarking on. So I need to tell you as a board, thus far, we as chiefs of police in Ontario haven't found a way to operationalize these 7 recommendations from the Human Rights Commission. And so what I'm coming to you today to say is, we as Peel Regional Police want to do this with you as a board through our governance committee and come back to you in September with an operationalized roadmap on how to adopt them. And the reason I'm saying this is historic is we're not doing it because we've received the judgment from the Human Rights Commission ordering us to do it. I'm saying to you that, and my leadership team and us as an organization want to do it because we believe it's, the right thing to do. And what we'd like to do is add this extra element of saying that if we don't do it, we're willing to go thus far as to say the Human Rights Commission, could, if in the multi-year roadmap, if it doesn't, whatever reason it falls off the table, hold us accountable. And I think you as a board have been asked to, I know the mayors certainly have been asked to do some meaningful things. We've seen recommendations that's come out of Toronto. We're not trying to replicate it. We're trying to show a leadership piece here. And And the reason you're getting this sort of teaser report, it's almost like I'm going to buy you this gift for Christmas versus buying you the gift, is because I think over the summer, we need to show momentum and make a bold statement publicly so that you know that we're going to do this. We've been talking behind the scenes with the governance committee, and there's this real desire to say it. We also are very sensitive to the fact that we want to do it meaningfully and not rush. And it takes a lot of discussions. We've got a big, broad team within Peel Regional Police that has been in discussions with the Human Rights Commission's team to see, you know, where is the middle ground to achieve these 7 principles. It's a lot of work. It's really a lot of learning on both our behalfs. But I think what you're getting here before you is a real commitment from this organization in a critical time in North America, Canada, and Ontario, and here in Peel Region, to really, and I've said this in the news, I've said this publicly, I testified to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Safety last week and said that a real shift to human rights-centric focus needs to happen, a shift to a pro-public health versus a law enforcement traditional method needs to happen. And we're happy here in Peel to do that with you. And I guess this is an information report to say in September, we will come for your approval and we seek your guidance and input on that. We have agreed to work through the governance committee as the initial step to get there. And I just would like to turn it back to either board member Atia or the governance committee or Chair Chadha for any comments.
Thank you, Chief. Board members, any comment or questions at this point on this report? Seeing none. Mr. Howell, you want to make a comment or?
Hesitantly, but I feel compelled to deal with almost 3 decades ago, Superintendent Fantino became the chief in Toronto, collected statistics, and of course it didn't go well, and there was almost a decade, 2 or 3 decade ban on collecting statistics by race. And we seem to have come full circle from that, because back then they considered it racist to collect statistics by crime by races. So I think the concern I see in Toronto, of course, they use that as an example of crime being based on race because of the huge ratio of Black crime in Toronto. I think it was 4 times the per capita rate. So I think when we look at it in Peel, my concern is, will that be the same criteria that will be measured by if our statistics are somewhat similar or any further out of ratio? That nobody's denying we have a concern about racism. Nobody's denying there's room for change. I think my concern is the criteria the OHRC uses to measure or quantify that. And if we're solely measured by that statistic, I just don't know how we measure up to that, or how we can possibly meet the goals the OHRC sees for Toronto. I think that's where I'm going here. I'm trying to get a grip on that.
Yes, so we can probably take a run at explaining that too. So one thing for clarity is what happened recently in Toronto is that the commission undertook to do work specifically related to Toronto, and it got an academic to look at probably 4 years worth of data, 2013 to 2017, which by all accounts was very difficult to get because it didn't really exist from the outset. What we're proposing to do is not do that same study. We're proposing, and I think in discussions with other chiefs in Ontario, are all at this point where awareness that, we simply don't have that information in hand. You would think that we could be able to say by race, gender, demographic, or any identifiable factor, could you tell us, to date how we're doing? We just don't have that. What we're proposing to do is create the systems in place at the front end to get that. So for example, if we have a contact with a member of the public to be able to have that information. that has been sort of echoed through a variety of different reports. How we utilize that will be up to Mr. Howell, you really as the board and us to see how we want to analyze it, how we want to report back to you. And I think, one of the key, and not to get into the methodology because, we really don't have the line of sight to the full methodology from what happened in Toronto, was that, they wanted to speak to, higher police communities versus lesser police communities. I guess we're saying at this point, unfortunately, we can't even, say how we're doing at this stage. And we don't want to use a rule and measure that is generic across all policing jurisdictions, because we would all agree that many of them have different factors. We just want to be able to say, here within our organization, that we have that info, that we are able to see it. So it doesn't really allay your concerns about, how will we be measured? Will we be, setting ourselves up for a scenario where we are going to see that there's disproportion? I guess from a leadership perspective, I think what we're saying to you as a board is, we're willing to take that on so that we can be open and transparent from that regard, and maybe to make those adjustments as we see it disproportionate, to say, okay, maybe we do need to look or deep dive why certain things are certain ways. I'm not sure if I really took you for a full circle, Mr. Howell, on that one, or I was able to add some clarity, but I guess we don't know what we don't know. And I think we don't even have the info right now to be able to say one way or the other.
Well, no, thank you, Chief. It does give me some comfort and clarity, because I think not only did the report that the OHRC rely on for Toronto for their basis, it also showed that whites were disproportionately charged per capita, and Asians and brown people, as they referred to them, were undercharged proportionally. So either way, that was theirs, and I'm encouraged with where you're going. And I think the most important thing is we are committed to making changes and eliminating any racism on our force, and that's the most important thing. I'm very comforted by that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Howell. We have Mr. Attia, then we have Mr. Boughton, and then Mayor Crombie to make the comment.
That's okay. You can continue to the next speakers.
Okay, Mr. Boughton, you next, and then Mayor Crombie.
Thank you, Chair. I guess a couple of concerns that I would have, and I'm directing this at you, Chief. Do we, there was a lot of blowback years ago about a quota system with the police having quotas to write tickets. Do we, going forward, then when officers pull over a person of color, then have to go out and pull over 9 cars that have obviously drivers that are white, in order to make sure that the proportion of people pull over who are POC against white, in order to make sure that the public believes that they are not being targeted, so that officers then they end up with a quota to have that balance of the pullovers or investigation, whatever, relative to the mix of that community. And I would find that disconcerting. The second part of my question would be the report that we've received, and of course it's all over the paper, from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, that was written by Scott Wortley. And I just wonder if you look back in the reports that were written earlier, back in October last year by Kanika Samuels, and those reports said, really is a reflection of his report, and that report that was written back last year was actually done by his wife. And I just wonder if there's bias in it, and that we're looking at a report that's written by one person. How many people contributed to that report that everybody today is hanging their hat on? And I find that a little, it's a little disconcerting what I'm looking at. And I don't know, maybe I'm seeing ghosts here.
So thanks, Mr. Howell, for this questions. Let me deal with the latter one first. So, I think our position here in Peel, should be, that particular report pertains specifically and exclusively to Toronto. And I think our important, the outcome for policing, generally speaking, is that, some of the issues that have been brought up there are not unique to other organizations. So really, I have not deep dived into the methodology of what the findings are in relation to Toronto. I think when I take a step back and I look at it, is so there's a report that has some findings. What is it that, in policing needs to happen? And I think just to, refocus again is, apart and aside from that report, there's a separate policy framework that is before us in the policing sector that, we as Ontario chiefs have, said, we agree with the spirit of them. So how do we adopt them? Be honest with you, I'm trying not to get focused in what the findings have directed Toronto to do or what they found in Toronto. I'm going to stay with what's within control here within our organization. And I think really, if we were to see what can we do and what's in control, it's some forward action. And I think the action is separate from that report, is adopting, this call for action, which is adopting the 7 principles. And what I intend to do is find a way to, do that here within the organization. So again, the short answer as it pertains to the methodology and what it says in for the Toronto Police Services Board in Toronto is, I think for us, even to my thoughts, Mr. Boughton, is, we stay clear of maybe unpacking, the history of it and what it looks like, and just say, okay, that being said, what can we do as a result anyways? And I think to refocus us is really moving forward on, ultimately the call to action is to do some meaningful work. So I guess your initial question is, what is this going to have a negative impact? So let me just say, for clarity, I think across policing and across the general public, and not us, I think we're all in a good stead here, is the real understanding of the difference between individual racism and systemic racism. So, I'm going to say that I'm proud of the 3,000 members of this organization. They are by far, leaders in policing. We have hired the best civilian and sworn, and I'm really confident in my 11 months here that we've got the best officers here. And I trust them implicitly. We've given them some broad authorities and abilities. We throw them a set of car keys and they hit the streets. And, we see time and time again the challenges that they face, sometimes insurmountable, and in the eyes of the public, held extremely accountable. And so they should be. And, so from an individual standpoint, my message internally to them is, I'm proud of them and they've got my full support. At a systems level, I think where we're lacking is we've never given it attention, whether it be in the healthcare system and the educational system, as we've seen even locally here in Peel, is what are the gaps and where can we tighten them? And what I'm really coming back to you as a board, and I hope to do in September, is a proposed roadmap for how we can tighten the systems. And along with that, Mr. Boughton, is going to be it's me telling my people, listen, if you hit the streets and you do what we asked you to do within your lawful authorities for the benefit of the public, to make sure that we are a strong and safe and vibrant community, and you're doing it with the right heart, the right mindset, we're going to equip you the best. You make good decisions. I've got your back all day long. And that means if they are stopping a motor vehicle because they have contravened the Highway Traffic Act, and they're doing it lawfully, they're going to have my support. And my message to my people is, go out and do that. Go out and do that. And I trust you. Where there are individuals that don't apply that appropriately, whether it's here, Toronto, BC, or in the East Coast, I think every chief, and you know what, probably every police officer here and civilian would say, we don't need that amongst us. I can deal with the individual aspects. I think along with this work, Mr. Bowden, is just a shifting of the tide. I think we're all kind of ready here to do this, and you have my assurance. I'm going to look after my people to make sure they know that they're supported. That activities like trying to go and offset data in order to balance out other data doesn't need to happen, because we just need them to go do their thing. And this piece of work, this walk-on report before you is really me saying that we're ready to do systemic change to, in addition to all that stuff, that good stuff you heard from Salia and Michael Bach. We're really going to strengthen. Can I tell you, it's probably us that have the hardest change. Our frontline people, they're already there. You look at them, they're multilingual, they understand diversity, they come from our community. I think they got this all day long. They really do. And so this is us just tightening the ship at a systems level, and saying we're going to be accountable. Are we going to hit road bumps from time to time? 100% we are. We're not perfect, but we're imperfect people trying to do a really difficult job. But you're going to have an organization that is going to step out in front of others to say we mean it this time.
Thank you, Chief. My main concern is that the resources that we have, in other words, the officers with boots on the ground every day, are doing their job, as opposed to going out to do a job to make a quota, to have the numbers, so that the perception is that they're not biased in the cars they're pulling over and what they're doing. And let's be honest, if you're in an area, if they're patrolling in an area that is predominantly has persons of color in that area, the number of people that they would pull over who are persons of color would obviously be a higher number than if somebody was patrolling in an area that was predominantly white. So I just want to make sure that we're not going to go forward building numbers and having the officers do it. Chief, I have all the confidence in the world in you and your team to do it right. I just wanted to say, and I thank you for your answer. We have a great force, and we'll go forward and let's do the right thing.
Thank you, Mr. Boughton. Next, we have Mayor Crombie.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
So I really, truly believe that collecting racial data is imperative to stamping out systemic racism. And if we don't keep track of who's being stopped, we can't measure it. And we can't measure if systemic racism exists. So we know that Toronto's doing it. And so we must do it as well. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Also, to make a point that it's easy to manipulate data. It depends on how you collect it and what the categories are. And as we are aware, there was an allegation that things were hidden in the last time we were collecting data under a no race category. So I want to be very cognizant of how we collect it and how it's stored and what categories are, because we all know the data only reflects how well it's presented, or how it's, the categories that it's placed under. You can do a lot of data once it's collected, right?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, those are great comments, and Anthony and I can chat about this. So, and also just a good information piece is that as a sector, the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police at a national level have a group that Anthony is a part of that is working on these standards so that they're not unique to different organization. We at a provincial level as chiefs are really desirous of finding out, mechanisms and standardized methods to do that, so that it's not one-offs or certain organizations aren't doing it differently. And even the commission itself is really in tune with making sure that it's done equitably across organizations in a consistent manner. What we've seen, I think, just generally speaking, is a shift anyways to that mindset. It's such a really simple thing to do these days, is check boxes and radio buttons to get data, but we haven't been doing it thus far. Already legislation is in place that's requiring us, for example, for the last 6 months when there's a use of force interaction with a member of the public. It is now a requirement under legislation for us to record that data. It is a complicated thing to do, is to identify people, and there are certain parameters that either can be self-identified or the perception of the person collecting the information. All those variables are, as you've rightfully so acknowledged, a tricky thing to navigate, but rest assured we're going to work together. And Anthony, I don't know if not, so Anthony is actually, it might sound like Anthony's got all the projects right now, but just, you know, all 4 deputies are equally spinning 100 plates in the air. This, because it's data-based, it's fallen to him, and Anthony is actually going to project manage it with as an executive sponsor on this. So Anthony, you want to speak a little bit to that without?
And before he does, can I just say, is there some sort of consistency that will be applied, you know, right across the region or right across Ontario, so that we're all collecting similar data or the same data?
I'll speak to that part quickly. At the moment, no, there isn't. I think I'm, you know, working with other chiefs to see how our experience goes so that we can model what that roadmap looks like. I'm fairly certain, I know other chiefs are independently looking at that. The Human Rights Commission, if you can see, they had 2 real calls to action. One was that it be legislated across the province. That's a big thing to do, to navigate it. So at this moment, there have been other police organizations like Ottawa and Kingston and other municipalities that have done data collection in different manners across time. It's not an easy project. It seems pretty easy, but it is. There's a lot of nuances to it, and maybe Anthony, you can maybe speak to that.
Thanks, Chief. There's really 3 main pillars here as we move forward to the data issue. One is collecting the data we need. We collect some, we don't collect others. In terms, to your point, Mayor, there will be some consistency about that. The second thing is ensuring the data quality. The data that we do have and the data that we do collect is collected appropriately. And I think, again, to your earlier point about maybe miscategorizing or using the data, it's collected appropriately so that when we do analyze the data and report to it, the consumer, the public, the community, everyone in the police service has access to the same consistent data, which paints the most realistic picture. And the third pillar of all this is introducing new race-based data collection, which we've collectively spoken to, not only in relation to the OHRC, but also in relation to police practice in general. And where do we find that data? How can we collect it? And how do we do that without discriminating or offending the rights of those in our community? So as we put that together, and we're doing that right now, we're forming a data governance committee. We've actually formed it. We're moving forward with one of our solution providers on it, members within the service and members in the province to understand those. The big and the more succinct answer is we're hoping by January that we have a very good deliverable to the board, a very good product that we could demonstrate, and that will actually show many of the things that we've talked about just now.
Okay, so thank you both. Just wanted to raise that. I do think this is imperative.
Sorry, if I could just, one more comment. This is, and I'm sure it's been said in our conversations, this is not an issue unique to Peel Regional Police. This is an issue that plagues police services and in quite other organizations across the province and then across the nation. And we hope to obviously be leaders in defining a solution for that.
Yeah, it's Mayor Brown here. I just want to echo, make the comment Bonnie said, keeping this data is integral. I've heard that quite often in Brampton, and so I'm glad that we've made that clear. Collecting and keeping.
Okay, if any other comment or question? Seeing none, looking for a mover and then seconder to accept this report. Moved by, I saw Mr. Atia's hand, and seconded by Mr. Howell, if I take. So everyone is all in favor? This is approved. So this concludes the public portion of the Peel Police Services Board. This meeting will adjourn for 5 minutes and then move in camera through Zoom conferencing. Again, I would like to thank all the members of the public and each and every tech team people who are helping us out to put this meeting together. And I want to thank all the viewers as well. So we'll be back in 5 minutes through our in-camera meeting. Thank you, everyone.